I was in the middle of a cross-country move, alone and more exhausted than I cared to admit. I'd been driving from Florida to Montana with my whole life packed into the back of a 10-year-old Honda, and no one but a gas station coffee cup for company. That night, somewhere outside of Kearney, Nebraska, the highway stretched into an endless dark ribbon, and I was too tired to trust my own eyes. My original plan was to crash at a friend's house 2 hours west. But my eyelids were getting heavy, and that soft, dangerous lull of the road had started to hypnotize me. I spotted a faded sign glowing faintly on the side of the road. Sundial Lodge, vacancy, weekly rates, and took the exit without thinking. The motel sat behind an overgrown patch of what used to be grass, next to a half-dead tree and a convenience store that looked closed even when it wasn't. A row of 8 rooms under a drooping metal roof, every door painted a different sun-faded color. One working streetlight buzzed above the cracked pavement. The office was a little box with blinds drawn tight. A bell jingled when I stepped in, startling a cat that leapt from the desk and disappeared into the back room. The place smelled like mold trying to cover itself up with air freshener. After a moment, a man emerged from the hallway. He was tall, maybe 6'2", with a paunch belly and skin that looked like it had stopped producing sweat the right way. His eyes were too wide, pupils dilated, and his thinning gray hair clung to his scalp in greasy tufts. His name tag, barely legible, said Earl. "You need a room?" he asked, voice raspier than expected. "Yes, please. Just for the night." He scratched his cheek, then his forearm. "Ain't ready yet. Gotta clean it. Just gimme 10. That gave me pause. "No one else is staying here?" He didn't answer, just turned and shuffled back down the hallway. I waited. Looked around, a dusty rack of expired snacks, a few Polaroids stuck to the corkboard behind the desk, smiling guests from a long time ago. Or maybe not guests at all. 10 minutes passed. I was about to just leave when he reappeared and dropped a brass key on the counter. "Room 8. Last one on the right." I paid in cash. He didn't ask for ID, just slid a paper receipt toward me that looked like it had been printed in the 90s. I parked in front of room 8, grabbed a backpack with my charger and toothbrush, and left everything else in the car. I was too tired to unpack. The room was as gross as you'd expect. Stained curtains, cracked linoleum, and a faint smell of wet drywall and old cigarettes. The bedspread had cigarette burns. The walls were yellowed in patches, like they'd once been white. The light bulb flickered when I turned it on, then settled into a dull buzz. But what really got me was how damp the place felt. Not humid, damp. Like the walls hadn't dried properly after a flood. The sheets felt clammy. The air was heavy, as though someone had just taken a hot shower and sealed the room up tight afterward. I pulled back the comforter and laid down on just the sheet, but I couldn't get comfortable. My skin felt sticky, like the moisture in the air was crawling into my pores. I tried turning on the fan unit, but all it did was blow more musty air around. Then I noticed the mirror. It was a tall, narrow thing bolted to the wall opposite the bed. One of those cheap full-length panels you can get at a hardware store. But something about it felt wrong. It was hung crooked. The frame didn't sit flush with the wall, and the reflection felt off. Not warped, delayed. Almost like there was a lag between my movements and the mirror's response. I walked over and stared at it. The closer I got, the more I noticed how the wall around it didn't quite match the rest. The trim cut off weird. The paint was cleaner, newer. I reached up and knocked. Hollow. I ran my fingers along the edge and found a loose corner. I pressed it. The mirror swung open like a cabinet door. Behind it was a small, dark compartment, just big enough for a person to crouch. Inside, on a folding chair, was an empty coffee cup, a pack of cigarettes, and mounted to the wall aimed directly at the bed was a small lens wired into the drywall. A camera. I froze. There was no dust in the compartment. The floor was worn. This wasn't a leftover from renovations or some long-abandoned hole. Someone had been using this, recently. I slammed the mirror shut and backed away so fast I tripped over the corner of the bed. I didn't pack. I didn't even grab my charger. I just snatched up my keys, shoved my shoes on, and ran straight to the office. The blinds were still drawn, but the lights were on. I banged on the door. Hard. Earl answered, wearing the same blank expression, except this time he didn't even bother pretending to be surprised. "There's a camera in my room," I snapped. He blinked once. "What?" "Behind the mirror. Room 8. A camera, a hole in the wall. Someone's been sitting in there, watching. He didn't flinch, didn't deny it. Just said, "You sure you saw what you think you saw?" I stepped closer. "Either you call the cops right now or I do." He held up his hands. All right. Let's not make this into something bigger than it is. I'll call." He turned toward the phone behind the counter and dialed. I listened carefully. It wasn't 911. He pressed 3 buttons, paused, then spoke in a calm, low voice. "Yeah, it's me. She found it. Room 8. Come quick." He hung up, looked at me. "They're on the way." I didn't wait. I turned and left the office, got in my car, and locked the doors. I should have just driven off right then. I know that. But adrenaline makes you think stupid things. I wanted proof. I wanted to record the mirror. I thought if I had video, I could show the real cops, not whoever Earl had just called. I told myself I had a few minutes, tops. So I backed my car into the shadows along the fence at the edge of the lot, turned off the lights, and waited. 7 minutes later, a truck pulled in, a white pickup with a rusted bumper, 2 men inside. They didn't park near the office. They parked in front of room 8. One got out, big guy, shaved head, wearing a flannel and jeans. He looked around, nodded at Earl, who had stepped outside, and went straight for the door. The other man stayed in the truck, engine running. The big guy used a key. They weren't cops. I put the car in gear and started to move when a second vehicle pulled in behind me, blocking the exit. My stomach dropped. The man in the new car, skinny, twitchy, walked right up to my window and tapped on the glass with a knife. "Out, now." I threw it in reverse, but he was already at my door, yanking on the handle. I floored it backward, swerved, and slammed into the trash bin enclosure. It bought me 2 seconds. I climbed across the center console and spilled out the passenger side, sprinting into the night. I didn't look back. I heard them yelling, heard a truck door slam, tires squealing. I ran across the road, through the ditch and into a field. The tall grass ripped at my legs. I kept running until my lungs burned and the lights of the motel were gone. I slept behind an irrigation tank that night, using my backpack as a pillow and a rock as protection. At dawn, I flagged down a pickup on the highway. I told the driver everything. He took me to the sheriff's station. They listened. An actual deputy drove out to the motel with me later that morning. The office was closed. The door locked. The rooms empty. But this time, they got a warrant, and they found it. The hidden compartment, the camera, the cables, the chair. They found several small cameras, some in vents, one behind a coat hook. They found a second crawl space connecting rooms 6 through 8. Earl was arrested the next day. He spent 2 weeks in jail. Then, somehow, he was released, never charged. They said the footage found was inconclusive, said they couldn't prove he had recorded anything. His lawyers argued that the camera was installed by a previous owner, that he hadn't cleaned the room in years, that I was just a paranoid traveler making accusations in the dark. None of it stuck. Earl still lives in the area. The motel is closed now, but only temporarily. He's listed as the property owner on the tax rolls. Every once in a while, I check Google Maps. Room 8 is still visible from the street view. That mirror, still there. I was supposed to be on a quick road trip to see my sister in Tucson. It wasn't anything dramatic or life-changing, just a long overdue visit. I left LA around noon and underestimated how boring and slow the drive would be. Somewhere near Blythe, I hit traffic from an accident and everything ground to a halt. What should have been a 7-hour drive stretched into over 10. By the time I passed through Phoenix, it was almost midnight and I couldn't keep my eyes open. I didn't want to stop. I was only 2 hours out from my sister's place, but I kept blinking longer and longer at the wheel. That heavy, sinking kind of tired where your body starts shutting down whether you want it to or not. I figured I'd pull over, find a place to crash for a few hours, and finish the drive in the morning. I looked up a few chain hotels on my phone, but they were all booked or charging over $200. I wasn't in the mood to pay that much just to sleep for 5 hours. I kept driving and saw one of those old-school motels off the side of the highway, the kind with a single row of doors, neon signs flickering, and a couple of dusty palm trees out front. It was called Desert View Lodge. even though there was no view of anything except a Shell station and a truck stop. I pulled in and parked. The office lights were still on, and a guy came out when he saw me. He was maybe in his late 50s, with a receding hairline and one of those friendly but too friendly smiles that didn't feel right. I asked if he had a room for the night. He said sure, $65, cash only. I hesitated. Something about him made my stomach tighten, but I was exhausted, and it was cheap. I handed over the cash. He slid me a key attached to one of those heavy green diamond-shaped plastic tags. Room 7. I backed into the space in front of the door, grabbed my overnight bag, and went in. The room was fine, not good, not bad. The lights buzzed when I turned them on. The AC unit under the window rattled like it had loose screws. The bed was covered in one of those stiff floral patterned blankets that feel like a tablecloth, but it was clean enough. I locked the door, set my bag down, and went to the bathroom. The tap squealed before water came out, but I splashed my face, brushed my teeth, and changed into a t-shirt and shorts. I got into bed and scrolled through my phone for a few minutes. No Wi-Fi, of course. 1 bar of cell service. I turned off the light and laid there listening to the hum of the AC and the occasional semi-truck passing on the highway. I don't know how long I laid there before I heard the noise. It was quiet, subtle, a soft scraping sound. At first, I thought it was just the AC or maybe the fridge turning on. Old appliances make weird noises. But it wasn't mechanical. It sounded deliberate, like fabric brushing against something. I held my breath. The sound stopped. I sat up and listened. Nothing, just silence. I got out of bed and walked around the room, checked the bathroom, opened the closet. It was empty. I even looked behind the curtains. Nothing. I figured maybe I was being paranoid. I'd watched some true crime thing on YouTube earlier that week about a guy who broke into a woman's apartment and lived in her attic for days. Probably had that on my mind. I got back in bed, pulled the blanket up, and stared at the ceiling. A few minutes passed. Then I heard it again. Shh! Like fabric dragging across carpet, but slower this time, and definitely from inside the room. My heart started pounding. I turned on the bedside lamp and sat up straight. Silence. I leaned over the edge of the bed and looked around the floor, and that's when I noticed something. The edge of the bedspread, the stiff floral one, was lifted slightly on the side closest to the bathroom. Just barely. Maybe 2 inches off the floor, like it had caught on something, or like someone had crawled under it. I didn't want to look. Every instinct in my body screamed, "Don't move." But I couldn't stop myself. I slowly slid off the bed and crouched down on the carpet. My heart was slamming so loud I could barely hear. I grabbed the edge of the bedspread and lifted it. There was a man under the bed, flat on his stomach. His face was turned toward me. He wasn't shocked. He didn't look afraid or caught off guard. He looked like he was waiting. Like this was part of the plan. We stared at each other for a second that felt like a full minute. Then I screamed, the loudest, most blood-curdling scream I've ever made in my life. I didn't plan it. It just came out of me, like a reflex. I grabbed my bag, phone, and keys and ran out of the room without even putting my shoes on. I didn't look back. I jumped in the car, locked the doors, and peeled out of the parking lot so fast I nearly hit the curb. I drove until I saw the lights of a gas station, pulled in, parked near the pump, and just sat there shaking. I could barely hold my phone steady enough to call 911. The dispatcher answered, and I told her everything. The motel name, the room number, the guy under the bed. She told me to stay where I was, that officers would meet me there. 2 police cars showed up about 10 minutes later. I gave them my ID, told them everything again, and they said they'd head to the motel and check it out. One of the cops stayed with me in the parking lot while the other drove back. The one who stayed, a younger guy, maybe early 30s, tried to keep things calm. He asked me to go over the story again, then said something like, "You did the right thing, getting out of there." The other officer called back about 20 minutes later. I watched the younger cop's face change as he listened. Then he hung up. There was no one in the room, he said. No sign of forced entry. No one under the bed. I couldn't believe it. I know what I saw. I kept telling him that. He was there. I looked right at him. He said they searched the room top to bottom. Nothing. Bed was empty. Bathroom was empty. Door was locked when they arrived. I asked if they checked under the bed. He said yes. Twice. They asked if I had taken anything that might affect my perception. I hadn't. No drinking, no meds, nothing. Eventually, they offered to escort me to a real hotel, and I took them up on it. I spent the rest of the night in a Marriott near the airport with every light on in the room, sitting on the chair by the door, watching the hallway through the peephole. I barely blinked. The next morning, I got a call from the same officer who stayed with me. He said they reviewed the motel's surveillance footage. Apparently, there was a camera above the office door that faced the row of rooms. I asked what they found. He paused before he answered. They saw me arrive, park, walk into the office, then go to room 7. 10 minutes later, a man appeared in the frame, walking out from behind the building. He was tall, wearing a hoodie and jeans. He walked with this strange shuffle, like he was trying not to make noise. They watched as he crouched down next to my car, then crept into room 7 through the bathroom window. It was cracked open slightly. I hadn't even noticed. He pushed it open wider, climbed in, and disappeared from view. 10 minutes after that, they saw me run out, barefoot, with my bag and phone, screaming. Then, this is the part that makes my skin crawl. 3 minutes after I left, the man climbed back out through the bathroom window. He landed awkwardly, like he'd hurt himself jumping down, and limped back around the building. Then he was gone. The footage didn't catch where he went. He never came back to the room. They searched the whole area. Nothing. The motel owner, the guy who checked me in, claimed he had no idea who the man was. But the window didn't look forced open. Nothing broken. Nothing pried. I don't know if the guy was staying there. I don't know if the manager let him in or if he was some drifter watching for women traveling alone. All I know is that he got into that room while I was inside, and he hid under the bed and waited. I replay that moment in my head constantly, the way his eyes looked up at me. Not surprised, not scared, just patient, like he'd been waiting for the right moment. The police filed a report. I gave a full statement. They took copies of the security footage, but they never caught the guy. I called my sister from the Marriott and told her I was driving back home instead. I couldn't explain why. I just couldn't stomach continuing the trip. Not after that. I checked the Desert View Lodge a few weeks later out of curiosity. The place had 0 reviews online, no listings, no official website. It was like it barely existed. And I still wonder how many other women stopped there before me and never thought to look under the bed, or how many didn't leave fast enough. I've driven trucks for most of my life. Started when I was 20, now I'm pushing 60. Seen a lot out there on the road. Blizzards in Montana, wrecks in Missouri, weird hitchhikers trying to climb into my cab at 3 a.m. Most of the time, it's just long hours and gas station coffee. But sometimes, if you drive long enough, you end up in the wrong place at the wrong damn time. This was about 6 years back, somewhere in New Mexico. I was hauling a load of fencing supplies out of Flagstaff, headed for a drop-off near El Paso. Nothing out of the ordinary, just another run down the 10, overnight. I'd been going for close to 14 hours, and by the time I hit Las Cruces, I was fighting to keep my eyes open. Pulled off the highway to find a place to crash. Wasn't picky, just needed a bed and a lock on the door. Found a little roadside motel called Sierra Sunset Inn, right off a frontage road with a busted neon sign blinking in red and blue. One of those long, flat motels with all the rooms in a line and an ice machine at the end. You've seen a million of them. Lady behind the desk barely looked up when I came in. Middle-aged, dark hair, smoking inside even though there was a no smoking sign behind her. Said it was $55 for the night, cash only. I gave her $60, told her to keep the change, and she slid me a key without another word. Room 14. I backed my rig into the gravel lot and grabbed my duffel. Room 14 was toward the far end, second to last before the dumpster. It was just past 10 p.m. and the place was dead quiet. Only 2 other cars in the lot, a silver Toyota with Arizona plates and a black SUV with tinted windows. The room was what you'd expect. Bedspread that felt like it hadn't been washed since the 90s, stale air, buzzing light. But it locked, and I was too damn tired to care. I tossed my bag on the chair, kicked off my boots, and laid down without even bothering to undress. I was out cold in minutes. I don't know how long I was asleep before the sound woke me. It was a thud, like something heavy dropped on the floor next door. I sat up, blinking. The clock on the nightstand said 1:42 a.m. I laid back down. Then I heard it again. Another thud, and then a sound I'll never forget. A man crying. Not soft crying either. This was gut-deep, terrified sobbing. Muffled like it was pressed into a pillow, but I could hear it clear through the wall. The kind of sound a man makes when he knows something real bad is about to happen. I sat there in the dark, listening. The wall between us was thin, old drywall and peeling paint, and I could hear everything like I was right in the damn room with them. Someone spoke in Spanish. Low voice. Calm. A few words I couldn't catch. Then something like hinket. That means kneel, I think. I drove enough miles through southern Texas and picked up enough to know that one. The man kept sobbing. Then I heard a slap, hard and sharp. Then the crying stopped. Silence. And then a scream. It was short, just one, but it was the kind of scream that comes from the bottom of your soul, like the last scream a man ever makes. And then a sound I can't describe properly. Wet crunching. I felt it more than heard it. I sat there frozen, heart pounding, trying to breathe as quiet as I could. Another voice, deeper, said something else in Spanish. Then, laughter. Cold, short, like it wasn't even funny. Just habit. I moved real slow and reached over to turn off the lamp. Sat in the dark, not moving, barely breathing. Then came more noises. Dragging, a zipper, plastic rustling. Sounded like they were wrapping something up. Heavy footsteps crossing the floor, a bang against the wall, my wall, like they knocked something over. I pressed my ear to the wall. Someone said, apúrate. That means hurry up. Then I heard a knock, but not on their door, on mine. 3 slow knocks. I didn't move. Then a pause, and the doorknob turned. They were trying it, testing it. I'd locked the deadbolt and latched the chain, thank Christ. I stood perfectly still, hand on my belt where I kept my folding knife. I don't carry a gun when I'm hauling, too much hassle crossing state lines, but I had that 4-inch blade, and I was ready to use it. The knob rattled again, then stopped. Footsteps walked away. I waited, straining to hear. Nothing for a while. Then a soft knock came at the window. Not loud, just gentle, like someone was tapping with a single finger. Tap, tap, tap. I didn't look. I sat on the edge of the bed, eyes on the door, knife in hand, pulse thumping in my ears. Didn't breathe. No more knocks, no more sounds. It stayed like that for a long time. I don't know how long I sat there before I finally moved. It was after 3 a.m. when I grabbed my bag and quietly crept into the bathroom. Shut the door, locked it, sat on the floor in the dark. I stayed there until the sun came up. When I opened the bathroom door again, the room was quiet and full of dusty orange light. I peeked through the blinds. The SUV was gone. So was the Toyota. I waited another 20 minutes before I finally opened the door. Didn't see anyone. No voices, just wind and heat. I walked over to the office. The woman was gone. Sign on the window said closed, back at 11. I got in my rig and drove. Didn't say a word to anyone. It was a few days later when I saw something on the news. Local story out of Las Cruces. A body was found out in the desert behind a truck stop. Male, late 20s, no ID, hands bound, execution style. They didn't give many details. But I knew. I kept driving. I never reported it. You might think that makes me a coward. Maybe it does. But I've been around long enough to know that kind of evil doesn't leave loose ends. I was lucky that night. My door was locked. I didn't make a sound. I didn't see their faces. And they left. That's all I wanted. Now I stay at truck stops. I sleep in the cab, even when it's hot as hell. I don't take chances anymore. And when I hear noises through the wall, I don't listen.